Hi, I'm Christine, and I'm going to be talking about wealth hoarders and stratification theory. I have chosen the functionalism paradigm and stratification theory to explain why the behavior of wealth hoarders is ultimately dysfunctional to society. Functionalism explains how harmony is conducive to a functional society, but it doesn't always necessarily function that way. From this perspective, though, stratification theory actually justifies the division of wealthy from the middle class and the poor. Furthermore, capitalism naturally creates divisions between people, such as between factory workers, their managers, and the owners. However, the wealth hoarding that we are seeing is not justified by capitalism or stratification theory. The natural stratification that is created by capitalism is unfair in a sense, yes, of course, but not necessarily unreasonably so. For example, the factory owner might get a bigger profits and a bigger paycheck because they took a risk in investing in the machinery in the company and so on, while the workers operating the machinery didn't take such a risk, so they don't get as big of a reward. But fairness isn't really the issue here. These wealth hoarders have used their wealth to remove themselves and their wealth from the otherwise harmonious system and elected not to participate in paying their share of taxes, and thus they damage the system by essentially removing a large amount of wealth from circulation. Wealth hoarding isn't just a natural part of capitalism. This isn't just everyone playing their role and getting a different reward. There isn't really any justifying this type of inequality. This is a small group of people hoarding a massive amount of wealth, not paying taxes, and hurting the rest of the country. Chuck Collins, the author of The Wealth Hoarders, reveals that the corruption of wealth hoarding in the US and discusses it in an interview with the Progressive magazine. He talks about how billionaires not only strategically evade taxes using financial experts in the wealth defense industry, but they also hold trillions of dollars offshore and build family dynasties to protect and preserve their wealth to prevent the principle from being diminished. The wealth defense industry is a group of financial experts, such as accountants and other tax experts, that know the laws inside and out, and they assist these wealthy billionaires in hiding their money and building their wealth. They may help them hide money offshore so that the US government can't tax it, for example, or they find other ways of allowing them to reduce their income and with other write-offs and such, so they have less income to tax. I learned, for example, that Warren Buffett himself actually did this to continue to build his wealth while avoiding paying taxes on it. He openly admits actually to holding onto his own stock to avoid turning it into income that could be taxed, and he also avoided paying dividends by instead using that money to increase the stock price instead. Thus, he avoided paying millions of dollars in taxes. Chuck Collins also discusses in his interview his experience with an elderly 70-year-old woman named Dee, who he met at her family office, who was from an old wealth New England family. He had conversations with her when he learned that he was going to inherit a substantial amount of wealth himself, and he wasn't sure what to do with it. And that's when he discovered the mindset of these wealth hoarders. Dee told him how he could live however he wanted, whatever sort of lifestyle he desires, but that he could not diminish future generations by decreasing the principle that he was to inherit. This mindset and this behavior, combined with the wealth defense industry, is how so many trillions of dollars have been removed from circulation in the economy and are simply being hoarded offshore or somewhere else safe away from taxes or anyone else who would want to access them. And after doing a little bit of my own research, I confirmed what Chuck Collins discussed. Not only is this wealth hoarding taking place, but the avoidance of paying taxes is a huge, and in my opinion, a huge problem, and what's doing the most harm to the country. Many people have never recovered from the Great Recession in 2007 to 2009 when the stock market dropped, and those that have fully recovered are likely in the top 20% or so. More recently, of course, the pandemic has been affecting people all across the country. Some, including valuable frontline workers, have been struggling just to pay bills and to put food on the table. But amidst all this, billionaires have seen their assets skyrocket and their wealth increase astronomically. I also learned of some of the other ways that billionaires avoid paying taxes legally too, such as holding on to one's own stock, like what Warren Buffett did, avoiding paying dividends as well, and they also will do other write-offs that allow them to strategically decrease their income while still allowing them to build wealth but avoid paying taxes at the same time, if that makes sense. And then, of course, there's the hidden money in offshore bank accounts and in certain trust funds that cannot be taxed. This is where the trillions of untapped dollars in wealth exist. And while I've heard of these things going on, what surprised me the most about this business of wealth hoarding is that the wealth hoarding and the building of these family offices that Chuck Collins discusses has actually been going on for over a century, and it's just been growing ever since. I also found it surprisingly that the majority of people all support the solution to this problem, which is an annual wealth tax. I assume that there would be more resistance to this, but something like this would still allow the wealthy to remain extremely wealthy, but it would also integrate them back into society and circulate the wealth that we are no longer seeing.